So in terms of job search, be prepared. Be prepared for a lot of things. You have to be prepared for the time commitment because it was like having a second job. I would go to my job, do my work, come home, and I would spend probably about 2 hours, maybe more depending on the day and how much time I had, searching and applying for jobs because you have to rework your resume, rework your cover letter. You want it to be personal. You want it to really match up. Like, look at what that job's asking for, see which skills you have. You gotta like play around a little bit, make it sound right so you get pulled. So that takes a lot of time. So be prepared for that. Be prepared for disappointment. I don't have an exact number of how many jobs I applied to, but it was hundreds, and I would follow up with people on LinkedIn. I'd follow up via email if I had an email for this company. Sometimes you never hear back. Sometimes you do hear back, but it's like, you're not it for us. There's a lot of disappointment, and you have to be like really confident in your skills, and you have to know like the right one will come for you. And it's really hard when especially if you're like frustrated and just so ready to move on. That disappointment's hard, but you gotta keep going and you gotta stay positive, and when it's right, it'll be right for you. I already mentioned this, but be prepared to make a lot of changes to your resume. Like, I think it's a good idea to have like just your resume as it will be, like all your skills, everything laid out the way you want it. Keep that copy, but then when it's time to apply to roles, you duplicate it, make the changes necessary to make sure you're gonna get those right keywords, and then save it for like, or you could like have one like, depending on what kind of role you're looking for, like product manager, project manager, have 2 resumes, have it saved. Skills can be a little different, so be prepared for that. Also, I have went through some interviews in teaching where there was multiple interviews, but there are a lot of interviews in tech, lots of rounds of interviews. I first had an interview with a recruiter for the job I have now, a recruiter, then the manager, then 3 people on the team, then the director. So like, it was a lot. And they often will ask you similar things, so you can kind of have your answers ready. But yeah. And I interviewed at a few different companies, and it was not quite the same process, but it was often multiple interviews with multiple people. So be prepared for that. And lastly, in the be prepared section is be prepared for rejection. I kind of already mentioned that with being prepared for disappointment, but you're not going to be the right fit for everyone, and that's okay because they probably weren't the right fit for you either. But I know that hurts. I know it's hard, especially when you really want something. Like the job I have now, I really like, there were 3 companies that I was talking with, and I really felt connected to the company I work at now. But they went with someone who had a little more experience teaching or training adults. But it so happened, and I kept in touch with some people on LinkedIn, and it just so happened, I think a month later, someone ended up going for a different opportunity from that team. So they had an opening, and they contacted me because like, I guess we had a good connection. It felt right for me already, and I guess it felt right for them. So that doesn't always happen for everyone, and I feel very grateful and very lucky for that. But I had to get rejected first, but then they came back, and so that was great. But speaking of what I just said, making connections, that's really important for job searching too. If you're not on LinkedIn, you should be. There's a lot of great resources posted on LinkedIn, but also there's people that work at companies out there on LinkedIn that you want to work at, and they'll be willing to talk to you. For example, I started chatting with a girl who's not even in the department that I am in because I saw she recently had gotten hired at the company I'm at, I don't know, a few weeks before I had an interview, and I just wanted to know like her experience. I'm just like, hey, can you like tell me, so you just got hired here, can you tell me like, how was that like interview experience? How was like your experience coming onto this company? And funny enough, I get to collaborate with her now. It's awesome. Like, I think back, like, I can't believe we both started like around the same time, and I still have her as a connection. So you never know how a connection, I mean, she did not help me get the job. She's in a completely different department, but it was just nice to have a little info about the company before even I had my interview. So I definitely recommend just reaching out to someone in a similar role that you're looking for, maybe at a company you're applying at, maybe not. You could also just, if you're interested in being like a corporate trainer, find somebody on LinkedIn that is one, maybe somewhere near you, maybe at a company you admire, and just ask them like how it is. Just ask them some basic questions, and most of the time you'll get a response. I do want to note, because I don't want to leave this out, I do have a master's degree. It's a Master of Education Learning and Technology. So I do think that probably helped me some, because in the title of it, it's not specifically like K through 5, which were the grades I was, actually, I didn't know you could do certified to do pre-K through 5th grade, but I don't know if that would have mattered. I don't think you don't have to have a master's degree to transition out, but I do want to say I think that was helpful, and that degree gave me some talking points that I wouldn't have had I just had like my teaching experience, and I had recently gotten it like early 2021. So I think that was helpful. Okay, I want to give you a little context around job interviews, and for me, it was really important to prepare. You could do a mock interview with yourself or someone in your family, or you can go online and like search on YouTube or TikTok, and you can have a mock interview with someone just like you're walking with me right now. But for me, I didn't do it with I didn't have a mock interview with a person. I just mostly practiced questions on my own that like you can like just go to Google like interview questions, and they're very broad, but it can just help you kind of prepare what you want to say. You don't want to sound scripted, but you also want to be able to have your answer ready. So I think that's important. Also, once you get an interview lined up, if you haven't already, which you probably have, but make sure you research the company. You want to be able to talk about, especially if you've seen something about their values or their vision, you need to like be able to talk about like, why do you want to work there? And it may be something super generic, but at least it lets the person interviewing you know that you took time to learn something about this company, and it wasn't just, I'm just looking for a job. And also, like I mentioned before, reach out to, if you get an interview lined up, you can reach out to an employee of the company that you find on LinkedIn and just ask them some questions about like their process, and if there's anything they think you should know or be prepared to talk about in an interview. Can't hurt. So something important, especially for teachers trying to get into a new role, but really could be applied for anybody trying to get a different career, is to make sure you relate things that you have actually done to the role that you want. Whether it be challenges, successes, things that you were like innovative about, times when you were adaptable, like all those things, you can certainly find things that relate to your new role, right? Like as a teacher, I had to plan and prep lessons a week in advance. In my role now, I have to plan and prepare the items I put on my sprint, because I work on a 2-week sprint, and we track that on software. So like I just put a list of all the things I'm planning to work on for 2 weeks. Not the exact same as lesson planning, but I can talk about that experience that I did with lesson planning and making sure I had all the materials, making, all that kind of stuff to show like, hey, I know how to plan for a week or 2 in advance and make sure I get everything done, stuff like that. And especially, probably with any job, but especially with teaching, I think it's really important to be careful how you word why you want to leave. Like most of the reasons I wanted to leave were negative, and you don't want to go into a new company bringing that kind of attitude. So I had to think about, what are the positive reasons I wanted to leave? Well, one was, I mentioned earlier, I'm ambitious, but I was a teacher. The only other place I was gonna go is if I wanted to be like a college professor, which I didn't, or if I wanted to work in administration, which I didn't. So like that was it. I was going there, I was already at the top of where I could go. So I wanted to be in a career where I could advance and do different roles if I wanted to. And teaching wasn't gonna give me that, and the new role could. Another thing was when we went virtual because of COVID, we had a learning management system called Schoology. It was like our first school year using it, and honestly, in elementary school, we didn't put a lot of stuff online like that. So there was a need in our school to learn about this software, and people just didn't get it. So there were like 3 of us, not everybody of course, but a lot of people were struggling with this software. So our principal asked 3 of us to lead a PD. So we did. And I really enjoyed teaching adults about software. And I'm like, oh, that's what, like, so that was something I could talk about during an interview. I could talk about my experience and how I planned and prepped and how I taught them how to use the software. And that's basically what I do now, is I teach customers how to use our software with learning videos and on-demand content and help center articles. So I'm doing that work just in a different way. So just be careful about how you explain why you want to leave teaching, and find something positive, find a positive reason why. I'm sure you can do that. One thing that you'll have to do if you decide to leave teaching is you gotta tell everyone. And I'm really lucky because my husband, my family, my friends, even co-workers, they were really supportive, but I know not everyone is always going to be supportive. But even though they were supportive, I got some questions and I got some comments. And one of them was, but you're a great teacher. And I'm like, thank you, I appreciate that, and I agree. And it kind of really sucks that I don't want to do this anymore, because I do think I was a great teacher. And it's a bummer that there are children now who aren't going to get to experience that. Like, I know that sounds like bragging, but I did a lot of things right. So that sucks. And I'm like, you know what? Thank you. You're right. I am a great teacher, but this isn't great for me anymore. You know? So you have to be prepared to talk about that. You also might get a lot of, but you went to school for this, right? Like, I have some student loan debt from being a teacher, from moving to a college that wasn't in my hometown anymore and having to pay to live on campus. That was expensive. Now I have a little bit of student debt from that. So there's that. Plus I have my master's degree. So like, you went to school for this, you took all this time, you sure you don't want to be a teacher? You might get a question like that. And again, the question is, or the answer, not the question. The answer is, yeah, like, you know what? I did go to school for that and I used it for 8 years. And now it's time for me to move on. Like, and I'm still using stuff I learned from all of that in my life or in my job now, so it's fine. And probably the biggest question, aren't you gonna miss the time off? Aren't you gonna miss summer break? Aren't you gonna miss like winter break and all these things? And of course, who doesn't miss that? However, every time I was on a break, I couldn't help myself but try to do all those little tasks I wanted to do. For example, like if I wanted to redecorate my class or get some new games or something like prepared, like laminated, cut out new letters, whatever, that was the time I had to do it. So I never really felt relaxed on my break. And I'm also a person who doesn't like having a huge amount of time off. So in the summer, I'd always be kind of grateful for that first week or two, but then I'd be like really antsy, and I liked it, but I also like, I didn't like it. Like, I wasn't ready just to get back and get going. So you might get asked that. And then of course, you have to tell your principal, your team. I guess you don't have to tell your team, but if you like your team, it's probably a nice courtesy to let them know you won't be coming back. Plus, they're gonna find out anyway. So I was lucky I had a really close friend at the last school I was at, And so she knew ahead of time that I was looking. She was really rooting for me. She's still teaching. She wasn't planning to leave teaching, but she realized, like, through all my stories and everything, like, it was time for me to go, and she was so supportive, and that was really helpful for me. But you might want to ask some questions when you do let your principal know, because it'll depend, like, if you've already signed a contract for the next year or not, and if you don't want to ever teach again, then that might not be a problem. In some places you have to pay to get out of a contract, so just make sure you ask them questions, or your the human resources. Make sure you ask questions so you know what the deal is with your contract, and if you'd be able to work at that school again if you want to. Because sometimes people leave teaching and they just want a break and they go back. So just make sure if you want to go back, you can. And then of course you want to, be thankful and be respectful when you're leaving. You don't want to be like, I'm so fed up with this place, I'm out of here, right? You want to make sure that you're grateful and thankful to your principal for the opportunity they gave you by hiring you, and whatever else they may have done for you, because more likely than not they'll need to write you some sort of review, or they'll get questions from your possible future employer if they want to reach out. So leave on a good note. Don't burn your bridges. That's what I'm trying to say. Don't burn bridges, because you never know if you want to go back to teaching, or what kind of connection you'll need with that person. And then of course, this is optional, totally up to you, but you may want to tell your students. I told mine because they were already telling me, oh, I want to come back and see you next year, and on my way to class I'll stop by and see you, and I didn't want to just randomly not be there. That would be terrible. So I was really just kind of honest with them and let them know, like, hey, I'm not going to be here next year. I enjoyed my time with you this year, but it's time for me to do something else. And I told them a little bit about my plans. So I think they appreciated that I was honest, and then they didn't have to be upset when they went to school and I wasn't there. But again, that's something you can choose to do or not to do. Up to you. And the last part I want to share with you is the big changes from being a teacher to having a new job, which could also be different if you work in an office versus working from home. I'm very grateful that I am currently working from home. So I'm going to go over the pros and cons. I'll actually start with the cons because I like to end on a happy note. But one con is, if you're very extroverted, you might miss the energy you get from being around people all day, and the attention the children will give you, because you will hear your name a whole bunch if you're a teacher all day long. You get asked a lot of questions. It can be very overstimulating, but some people like that. There was a time that I enjoyed that. So you also have that community with your team, with your students. That's a con. I miss that. I miss that a lot. Luckily for me, my company has 4 volunteer days a year, 1 a quarter, and so a few times a year I get to go back and work in my first school that I spent 7 years at and get to see some students, although now my students are about at their last year of elementary school, so I won't really be seeing anymore, but I get to go and see some of my teacher friends and help out on field day or book fair, kind of those fun events, and it's really nice. So I'm grateful for that. Another con I said is movement. Of course, you can move with any job, and I move with my job now. I mentioned I walk during my work day sometimes, but I have to be very intentional about it. I know I start my morning every day, when my day's slow, when I'm checking emails, just kind of prepping for the day, I can walk for 15 minutes to get my day started. And I know that if there's meetings I don't have to show my face in, I can walk. Or I know there's going to be certain times throughout my day where I'm going to be working on something where I can walk at a slow pace, or I'll use the last few minutes of a lunch break to walk. So I've had to be very, very intentional and purposeful about when I walk. And as a teacher, I was moving around all the time. I hardly ever, unless I'm in a small group, I wasn't sitting down, and sometimes even in a small group, I had to get up and go and work on some other stuff in the classroom. So I was moving all the time. So one con was I was moving easily. now I have to be intentional. Something else that's a con is having someone to ask questions to right away. Like that could be with any job that I'm talking about. With teaching, you could yell across the hall or right next door to you, however your hallway was set up. Or if you had like an ESOL or EIP teacher pop in, you needed help with something, you had somebody right there to ask a question to. And if you're home alone, luckily there are communication tools, and most companies do have, like we use Slack at our company, so I can pop on and ask a question, but it's not the same as having, like if I'm having a computer issue, or someone right beside me that may have had a similar computer issue and they know how to work it out, they could tell me. You don't have that, so that's a con. This next con is particular to teaching, but not feeling that same sense of purpose. Like as a teacher, I felt like I had a big purpose. I was teaching 6, 7, 8-year-olds how to follow school rules, how to be a better person, because I did like social emotional lessons when I could, and tried to talk about that a lot with them, and when there was conflict between students, tried to help them figure out how to get through it. So, and of course, just your normal math, English, reading, writing, all of that. Like you have a real strong sense of purpose when you're teaching someone that, like, reading will change your life. So that was a big sense of purpose that I miss. My purpose now is to teach people how to use a product. Still a purpose, it doesn't quite feel the same. And cons, mentioned before, the break. Of course you mentioned you miss the breaks, but I was really stressed on breaks a lot, so I don't miss them that much. But for someone thinking about, do I want to do a different job? A con might be that you're not going to have those breaks anymore, like that big summer and all the breaks in between. And if you have kids, especially being on a similar schedule to them, of course, is super helpful, so that'll be a con. Now for pros, my number one pro is time. There are a lot of things under my time category, but of course the first one is there's no commute for me working from home. Obviously, if you transition to a job and you work in an office, you will still have a commute, but for me, my office is right across from my bedroom, so commute's real short. It's non-existent, which has helped me with my next point, which is sleep. Now I have time for more sleep, so I don't have to get up as early and drive however far away my work is and get ready for work. Like, it's a lot less stressful of a morning. I have time to eat. When I was teaching, there were days when by the time I made that copy I didn't get to because the copy machine was broken, or dealt with whatever issue was in the lunchroom, or got off the phone with a parent, I had like 5 to 10 minutes to scarf down something that was miserable. So now I have time to eat breakfast, I have time to eat lunch, I have time to prepare stuff. That's magical. Time to go to the restroom. As a teacher, if there's not someone there, another adult, to let you go to the restroom, you have to wait. So coffee was not my friend during my teaching years because I needed to go to the restroom and I couldn't go. A lot of times I had to wait it out, which was rough. If you have pets, you have more time for them. Like, I'm sure my dog is so grateful. She gets to hang out with me all day, and she gets to go on several bathroom breaks, and I can like be working in my office chair and throw a toy and fetch with her. Doesn't take anything away from me and gives her joy, so there's that. You have more time to spend with your family. You don't have your commute anymore, and in my case, I'm not coming home from work and then spending more time on work. So a lot more time for my family, and most importantly, you have more time for you. I get to do things I want to do now, such as this channel. I wanted to create this space so you could walk with someone if that's what you wanted to do, and I guess it's a space for me to, I don't know, just share my experiences and feel like I have a camaraderie with you. So I get to do that. I've worked on writing a book. I'm going to start a podcast with my friend. I mean, I don't know, I'm sure there's even more. So I just have time for me now to work out. That's a big one. So yeah, that's time. Not having to be on all day is another pro. I've mentioned before, being a teacher is basically being an actress. You can be vulnerable with students and kind of show them like who you are, but also like when you're teaching and your job is there to be supportive for them and to teach them things, you have to be kind of on all day, and that is exhausting. And so I don't have to be on all day anymore, just when I'm in meetings, which are typically no longer than an hour here and there. So that's really nice. And this last pro, it's not a pro for everyone because not everyone will have it, but I do, luckily. And that's unlimited PTO. I say unlimited. I think there is like a limit where you can't take so many weeks off consecutively. But back to, do I miss the breaks? No, not really, because I'm able to take breaks whenever I want now. I can go on vacations anytime during the year. Doesn't have to be when everybody's on school break going on them, and I can take time off my birthday. Like I mentioned, I have volunteer days. We get a lot of holidays off as well. Most of the holidays, like the Mondays you would get off from school. I get President's Day off. I get Martin Luther King Jr. Day off, Labor Day, Memorial Day, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Christmas, day after Christmas, New Year's. Like I get some days already, but it's not a big deal if I tack on days around it. So yeah, that's also very awesome for me. But I would say probably a lot of places have went to a model like that of unlimited PTO, but even if not, you'll get vacation at a new place, and you'll learn that you don't need those breaks as much if your job isn't stressing you out all the time. So there's that too. But I hope that this video was helpful to someone if they're thinking about possibly taking on a new career, or especially if you're a teacher thinking about going to tech or any other job. I just say tech because that's where I landed. And of course, if you're a teacher and you're happy, then thank you so much for being a teacher, because it is so hard and it is not for everyone, and we need good teachers out there. So I appreciate you, and I know all the other people in your life appreciate you too. But thank you so much for walking with me today. I'll see you next time. Bye.